Welcome back to the next episode of the Security Champion podcast. I am Michael Birch, the Director of Application Security here at Security Journey, as well as your host. Today I am joined with Ron Woerner. He has 20 years of IT and security experience and is a noted international consultant, keynote speaker, teacher, blogger, and writer in the data privacy and cybersecurity industries. For Forrester Research, Ron is a senior security and risk consultant, and he focuses on building cybersecurity and zero trust program for large organizations. As a president and chief security officer at Cyber-AAA, he works as a security consultant, acting as the virtual CISO, performing security risk assessments, advising leaders, and delivering security training worldwide. And Ron has established a cybersecurity studies program over at Bellevue University, an NSA Security of Academic Excellence, where he still teaches. Now, better than me just listing off a bunch of accomplishments and places been, I think that having Ron tell you what has led him down his security journey is the best place to start. So, Ron, what has brought you to be the security expert you are today?
Well, thank you, Michael, for having me, and welcome to everybody. Like so many, there really is no just one path. In fact, I started doing computers before they were really even a thing. Back in the 1980s, if you wanted to play computer games, you had to program them yourself. So that's really how I first got into computers. You had to build the computers yourself. I developed that early interest, and then it led me into a computer science degree. Now, to get my computer science degree, I was fortunate enough to be part of U.S. Air Force ROTC program. They paid for me to go to school. And in the Air Force, I was an intelligence officer. So they didn't have me do coding, even though I do have an application background with my computer science. You combine computer science with intelligence. It led me right into the early days of information security in the 90s, where then I began to build out security programs for different organizations. You see, I actually started as a Unix sysadmin. This was even before Linux. Little part of my claim to fame, 15 minutes, is I worked at Bell Labs with the guys who actually wrote Unix back in the day, part of their archives. So really interesting fellows. But yeah, working as a Unix sysadmin, I just wanted to protect my stuff. That's how I developed these different security checklists. I wanted to make sure I wasn't missing anything as I was building out a system. So they're kind of like the CISSP benchmarks or STIGs that we see today, where you follow, make sure that they're locked down to the appropriate level. So that's what I developed, and I began sharing them with others, and that's actually how I got into speaking. One thing led to another. As a Unix security person, I looked around me at one particular company, and I said, okay, I'm Unix, where's network, where's Windows, where's the developers? Oh yeah, we don't have those. So I took it upon myself, and I built the security program. From the ground up, everything from policies, standards, all the way to those technical configurations. Got into teaching because I'm passionate about building people, consulting because teaching doesn't always pay well, plus keep my hands dirty. What's happening? And then for the last year at Forrester, I've been focused on the buzzword zero trust, which really takes a lot of the concepts we've been talking about and makes them very actionable. What do I mean by that? Well, it's understanding what can go wrong within a network, within the devices, within the application, and then limiting that. It's almost making the assumption something's bad is going to happen, so it's failing smart. If you've been through like CISSP, CISM training for fail open, fail shut, I just say, make that decision. How should we fail? And thinking that, yeah, failure is inevitable. So having that safety net and blast radius contained. And that's really what zero trust is about. So it's just being able to help organizations secure their applications, their infrastructure, their servers. That's what really drives me, Michael.
So I love the conversation around zero trust, because I think there's some ambiguity when people think about what it really is. One of the places that I always like, last conversation I think I was somebody about it, everyone's like, well, the idea is that you just never trust anything no matter where you are in your network, right? Like, so always authenticate, always do anything, just trust nobody. But I think there's so many more layers about that, because you made a critical statement there, right? It wasn't just about not trusting. It's also about the fact is just making a decision and going with it, right? And sometimes even then that might be fail open in the right situation, but it's the act of making the decision. Security only really fails, in my opinion, when we ignore it, when we don't make the decision, right? And instead it just happens. When we make the decision and we're like, okay, risk mitigate, but you know what, we'll let this one fail open because that's what makes sense in the scenario. We're still at least making that decision, right? We're acknowledging the risk.
Exactly. It's working with the business owners. Too often security is known as the office of no, where we'll just, we have to be compliant. And this is the balance between compliance, which says you have to do some things, and risk, where, again, it's about the business. So really security is a lot about economics. I know later we'll talk about how do you build a security career, and I say learn as much as you can across many different topics. Let me give you an example, Michael. In my early days, I was part of a security team at ConAgra Foods, food manufacturer. We didn't have a big security team. Huge freezers the size of a high school. Those freezers, are the doors, do they fail open or fail shut? Open. Life safety, number one. In fact, we called our group Information Safety and Security because we wanted to keep that mindset. Same thing with an application, how do you want it to fail? So it's working with the business and being able to have those conversations rather than just being the hard driver. And that's sometimes the challenge, that balance with compliance. Now with zero trust, it's continual. It's kind of been misunderstood over the last 10 years since John Kindervag first wrote about it at Forrester. Think about it. Back in the early days, you had your VPN. Once you were inside, you could go anywhere. We call it east-west. We didn't think about that insider threat. Well, the idea is to reduce what that person can do. Even with a well-meaning administrator, who just always wants to run as admin. Well, I'm always on the box. I should always run as admin, right? No, keep yourself off the suspect list. Another little saying we came up with. If you don't have access, you can't be blamed if something goes wrong. So that least privilege idea is all part of it. It's just continual growth of security by understanding the risks, working with the IT and business managers almost as a liaison to build that right level of security.
I love that saying. I've never heard that before. Keep yourself off the suspect list. That's a phenomenal way to articulate someone why they need the principle of least privilege applied. So phenomenal. Something else I kind of keyed in on there too. Think about like trust. One of the things that I think that has made the trust behind systems most prevalent in my world in conversations the last 2 years has been SSRF, right? OWASP top 10 through that and then the number 10 list. And one of those number of things they talk about is your trust. Your assumed trust, right? And that's what allows it to happen, right? You have, I'm on my own system, already on my server. I should trust anything comes from it because if you're here, I should already trust you, right? How else would you have gotten here? Going against that natural default and creating those touch boundaries and security controls even within what we think is our trusted boundary, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, what we're seeing with AI today, it can be hard to tell what's real and what's potentially fake. Think of deep fakes. So it's really just being open for ourselves, and actually I don't even trust myself because someone else who's impersonating me. So what I'm trying to do is reduce my own headaches. And I'll use this phrase, who owns the headache? So if you are running with too many privileges, you can cause yourself too many headaches. But it's just understanding and doing that threat modeling. And so many just don't understand how to threat model. If you've read Adam Shostak's work when he's been at Microsoft and since then writing about threat modeling and Star Wars, which is really just a fun take on it. Having those open conversations, what can go wrong? What are we going to do about it? How do we detect it? How do we respond to it? All of those are part of it. And as application developers are coding, thinking about that more than what are we going to do in this instance, But how do we detect? Because you may just need to keep things open to allow that usability, user experience, but then you have a detective and alerting mechanism in place and sending an alarm to someone that needs to take some action. All of this is part of that strategy that needs to be developed by working together between security, application developers, and operations, the old DevSecOps.
Yeah, it's funny. I love threat modeling is a huge part for me, right? I love the concept of doing that. I actually got Showstack's book on my shelf behind me here. You're actually mentioning. It's funny because this last year we did an RSA workshop on the whole product, right? Like how to do threat modeling, because it's such a key part of looking at that architecture. And especially when we talk about moving to zero trust, is looking at how we've built this out and have we actually built what truly is a zero trust architecture, or are we just using buzzwords, right? There's the biggest thing I think that we sometimes fail as security people is we like buzzwords, so we'll say them in stand-ups, but are we really implementing them, right? Are we truly following this? It's kind of, I think, agile, right? People use agile as a buzzword. And I go out and start looking at the way people are developing. I'm like, yeah, this isn't really agile. I think you just like the term and the concept. Like, you're not necessarily applying it the right way.
Right. Well, and it's understanding what are the guidelines around it. And I might challenge you with that, Michael, in terms of the right way, because there might be slightly different depending on the organization and the mission. So it's understanding that these are tools, a means to an end. So CISA has their zero trust maturity model with the different components along the different pillars. Organizations are trying to reach advanced through it. So it starts with traditional, initial, advanced, optimal. Keeping in mind, it's a spectrum of maturity. Organizations that come back and say, yeah, we want to do zero trust, that's telling me they don't, like, if they say we want to do agile, what does that really mean? What are you hoping to accomplish by taking this? Understanding it's a means to an end, it's not the end itself. You can't be zero trusty, if you will. So it's working towards that, understanding the maturity, and then using, whether it's zero trust, whether it's DevSecOps processes, agile, understanding how it works within your environment is key.
Yeah, and that's crucial, right? So there's not I think with all the stuff we talk about here, and I think we'll talk about even a little bit more when we get into the second part of the conversation about mentoring and security champion programs. This type of stuff is it's not a one-size-fits-all, right? You have to do an evaluation. And this applies to almost everything we do in security, right? Like, it's the same person that says, oh, I'm just going to put a DAS tool out of the box, plug it in, and it's going to work, right? I'm like, that's not real, right? You have to customize it for your environment. Otherwise, you're going to have a bunch of false positives, which is going to frustrate the devs, or you're going to start getting false negatives, which we really don't want as security people, right? So you got to find in that balance and building it out for your environment. Same thing with zero trust, doing agile, all these other type of large concepts we try to apply in IT.
Exactly. It's in zero trust, we call the development side the workload, which combines the operating system, the application. It could even be the cloud compute environment. What is doing the work, but it works together with the other components or pillars. CISA calls the different areas pillars, which implies silos, or in reality, it's string theory. Everything is related. So it's understanding those connections. And that is often the challenge, because often we just see our own little world. I'm putting on blinders right now. Working with zero trust champions, they see across different areas and understanding the connectivity, whether it's data flows, how that application could be used, misused, or abused is part of it. Whether it's on purpose or by accident. I mean, Michael, have you ever started using an app and realized that you got an error state completely by accident and you could potentially corrupt something? Yeah. We don't mean to be pen testers. It just kind of goes with the territory sometimes. But it's being able to have someone you can talk with on that, to be able to find that right solution.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that drives the core right there, right? Having those champions, having the right people in the right place to help drive that forward. All right, I think we're at a spot here. We're going to take a quick break. We do a 30-second commercial from our sponsors, and then we're going to come back and get back into the meat of the conversation.
How do you create security champions? Security Journey is the solution most adopted to provide application security education to help developers become security champions and produce safer applications. Security Journey training content extends beyond developers to reach the entire SDLC, creating a security-first organization. Learn more about our enterprise security training at securityjourney.com.
So welcome back to the Security Champions podcast. I'm here with Ron Woerner, and we're going to be talking about mentorship in the security space. Now, Ron has a lot of experience and time within security, seen a lot of opportunities to mentor junior people as well, build programs out. So I'd love to take your key ideas of what does it take to be a successful security mentor?
Learn from anyone, everyone, everywhere. Actually, that was something one of my bosses, former CISO at TD Ameritrade, taught me when I was there. We can learn from all different areas, and it makes it very synergistic, if we can use that buzzword, where I learn from you, you learn from me, we build each other. It's kind of like that iron sharpens iron. Sometimes there may be some sparks, but together we can be better, stronger, more secure. So just be open, always be learning, or I like to use ABC, always be curious. So Michael, I'll work with younger students sometimes, and they graduate and they're like, yay, no more homework. And I'm like, yeah, guess what? Homework begins, you're shaking your head, homework begins after you graduate. So I'm always reading, learning something new, knowing who to follow on LinkedIn, but just always be open to growing yourself and then seeing, how do I share that with others? How do I help others grow? See, Michael, we have an interesting challenge in cybersecurity. We're trying to work ourselves out of a job, knowing we never will. If the organization is safe and secure, they don't need us, right? Yeah, that's not going to happen. So it's just teaching as many people, and that's my passion about mentoring. And then just working together, and if you're looking for a mentor, don't be shy. Reach out to others and just say, hey, can we just have some conversations? Is really as easy as it is. It starts just by saying hi.
And I feel like when we start these relationships, right, we find mentors, but part of it is like making sure that you work well together. Not all mentors work for all people. It's like any relationship building we have, right? We gotta fit. If I can't feel confident in talking with you and I don't feel comfortable, then you're probably not the best mentor. And I like to, with everything I do, like in security, and this not including, fail early and fail often, right? So it's right away, like, hey, test it out. I don't know if this would be a good fit. No one should take offense in that interaction, right? Like it's social interaction. Like, all right, if you don't feel comfortable with me, even if I felt comfortable, one of us weren't great, move on, let's try somebody else, right? Fail early, fail often. Now, when we think about mentoring too, every category of mentoring is going to be a little bit different, I think, too, right? The way I mentor with another security individual versus being a mentor for something like a security champion is going to be approached differently. How could you see some of the things we might want to consider there when looking at those differently?
So it's understanding about the person, getting to know who they are, their background. It's basically social engineering them, which can be both positive and negative. At RSA, I give a talk called Unfluence, which is the dark side of influence, where it could be used negatively, but it's the same tactics. If you read books like How to Win Friends and Influence People, calling people by their names, that likability factor. So it's just finding out who they are, their background, seeing what their goals are. Do they match with my goals? And you're absolutely right, Michael. Sometimes I've actually starting a job and they connected me with someone and you could just tell it was just not going to hit off. He had different background. Our goals weren't the same. So exactly, it's nothing personal. I really like this person as a person, but it wasn't going to work well for me to be the mentoree, if you will. Same thing as a mentor. If someone asks you to be a mentor and you're like, yeah, I don't really think I can help you. But as a mentor, maybe what you can do, still take the leadership and say, you know what, I'm not the right person, but I know this person over here. Let me connect you. And being that connection between people. Because sometimes it could be a time thing too. Yeah, like you were talking about taking your daughters camping. If someone has a lot more needs, maybe it's just, you know what, I don't have the time to be able to help you the amount that you really need. But again, let's connect others. So it's connecting people with other people, connecting people with knowledge, connecting them with skills. Finding someone that you challenge and that can challenge you as well is a part of it. The only way you get better is by learning from mistakes and really stretching yourself. So if you find someone who's just not going to push you, then again, maybe that's time to find someone else who can do that for you, or that you can do that for them. Lots of different techniques here.
So one of those things that you brought up, and it's something I think mentors or people that are in that kind of like even leadership positions in general forget sometimes. Communication is a two-way street, right? Yeah. I'm not just telling you or just teaching you or you're just going to follow what I'm saying. A lot of the times, like I've learned so much from people that are working for me or that I've been trying to mentor in the cyberspace. A lot of places I end up mentoring a lot is actually kind of from similar military background as yourself, right? I had military background. A lot of transitioning service members will actually reach out to me like, hey, how'd you get into cyber? How'd you get into tech? What were the steps going in? And I end up teaching them a lot. But a lot of the time, I learn a lot from them, from their different approaches, like a whole lot more from the people that I've been mentoring or been working with, and being open and willing to understand that, hey, as a mentor, this you have so much you can learn from the people that you're working with, and seeing those diverse views and paths and way they approach problems. It's a great opportunity for that mentor to grow themselves.
Exactly. And it becomes where we help each other, we grow each other with it. Having mentored high school students, I actually had to work with ISC Squared and ISACA to get that mentoring to count as towards CPEs. One of the things I've learned, though, is just in teaching, while I'm passionate about teaching, is really the way to learn something really in depth, try to teach someone else, and then get them to teach you back. As you put it, Michael, you'll see a different perspective. Maybe it's a different way to solve problems. In cybersecurity, there's rarely just one way to solve a problem. It is people, process, and technology, and it's having that back and forth conversation with whom you're working with. And whether it's a formal mentorship relationship or just very more casual. And then being open to, hey, where do I need improvement? So many who have been doing this for a long time are almost to the point of being uncoachable, to where allow yourself to be coached. Look at the best players in the world. So right before we record this, the previous weekend was the US Open. Look at the best golfers in the world, or best, name the sport. They all have coaches who can look for those little differences and then have open conversations on what we can do better. So that is also key, not being shy about sharing what you're seeing. Again, the idea is to build others.
Yeah, and I think that there's so much power behind that, and that understanding and open communication and willingness to be flexible and learn. And also willing to understand and recognize in yourself that, are you a good mentor? Like some people just aren't built to be mentors, and that's okay. Like it's kind of the same idea. Like we're in the tech world, right? And I think there's a small community within the tech world that likes to get up and do public speaking, on video stuff, communicate, and like really what I would call our social engineers of the space, right? But there's a lot of people that are like, I don't want to do that. I just want to sit out and I want to do my technical work. That's what I want to be. Knowing yourself in that same space as a mentor, being like, it's okay if I'm not a mentor. And especially when we think about security champion programs, because a lot of things I try to talk about building here, the leadership that are building these programs, you can't force people to be mentors. Right? No. If you walk up and say, you're going to be a mentor because I need you in that space, you're going to have poor results. It's not going to work well, because they're not going to either A, they might not be the right fit for it, and B, they might not want to do it, right? So if they don't want to do it, they're probably not going to do it well. So when we're finding these people, volunteers, people who actually want to be mentors, is going to be a much safer bet. I would take a less technical person, maybe with a little less experience, that wants to be a mentor way more than I would take a highly intelligent, highly technical person that doesn't want to do it.
Exactly. It comes back to that passion about attitude. Fascinating how we come back to that. So many think cybersecurity is only about the technologies and the in-depth hands-on skills. Really, it's having that can-do attitude. Same thing with the security champions. I loved how you put that, Michael. It's just finding who wants to be a part of it. Often I get asked the question, how do we establish a security champions program? Isn't this just another thing I need to do? Added job, as part of everything else I have going on. How is this going to fit in with everything else? It's like, if it's just kind of part of what you're doing, as you're seeing something, you say something, it's not really seen as an additional duty. It's just sharing of that information. Let me give you an example. I was working about 5 or so years ago for an international hotel chain and starting a development security champion program. And I found one developer. She was really good. She just wanted to learn more about security. So, she mentored me about development. I mentored her about security. She wrote the different procedure calls and modules, to look for and scrub input that then could be used throughout our code base. So made it actually very easy for others. I made it easy for her to be able to be a security champion as part of the developers. So you showed her the OWASP tools. This way it's not seen as additional work. And that's really part of it. It's just showing the benefit, reducing our own workload over time. Really, the key word I've had for the last few years, Michael, is efficiency. If we help the developers be more efficient, they can focus on the really hard problems rather than repeating the same ones over and over again. Definition of insanity.
And you know what? So that's actually something I champion a lot in conversations, is this idea that when a lot of times I'll get the response from people in security because they have a very rigid mindset that, no, the developers are lazy. That's something I've heard before. And I immediately, the moment someone says that, I cringe. And the reason being is you're telling me somebody that took all the time to get a master's degree in computer science, that went out and mastered the art of software development, because it's an art. It's well beyond a science, right? That has taken the time to, and usually now let's talk about our senior people that maybe have 5 or 6 years to build themselves in this industry, and you're trying to tell me that they're lazy and that's why this isn't getting done? That doesn't make sense, right? Let's relook at this and be like, okay, what are we doing that's a blocker that's not facilitating them to get this done, right? Because what's going to happen is they have a million really important things to do, and when they go to do the part that we're asking them, if it's hard, if it's not clear, if there's good example, false positives or bad data that they're receiving, and they go to work on it, they're like, this isn't real. So now they're wasting time. That's where I think we lose our developer community, because like I said, they're not lazy, nowhere near. It's we have to make it as easy as possible for them to do what we're asking, and that's when we're going to see some of that shift.
Well, it comes back to that user experience. And this isn't just for the end user, it could be for the administrator. Developing a ConOps, or concept of operations, as a part of the development cycle. We sometimes don't think about as part of DevSecOps. How will this be used? Having that perspective. Being able to follow the breadcrumbs, asking why something, why isn't something being done? I think a good example could be in terms of documentation for the application and putting in comments. Comments is the bane of the developer's existence. I need to comment my code. Well, people should just understand. It just makes the logical flow, right? Well, you're making an assumption there. Assume who may be seeing it may not have the same background that you do, but sometimes we just make it so hard. No wonder people don't want to do it. So it's just being able to see how to make other people's lives easier. I'm going to throw another saying I like to use in these podcasts. CYA. No, not that one. Challenge your assumptions. So often, you made the assumption, developers are lazy. Yeah, that's a big assumption. You know, start with why. Why isn't it being done? And there could be a very good reason. Maybe they just don't have the tools involved. Maybe they just don't have the time involved or the resources to do it. Maybe they are doing it and it's just not in the right format. So it's asking lots of questions. So in talking about a good leader, Michael, it's more about asking the right questions than always having the answers.
Yeah, and assumptions, right? That's what gets us all in trouble, especially when you start thinking about things in security. Like from our standpoint, right? The moment someone starts assuming we're doing something a certain way and we don't validate, we don't check, we assume the user's going to do something, so that's how we build it. That's when we get ourselves into trouble. We start leaving a lot of open doors to attack because we're making assumptions. That holds really true with the way you said that for our developer community, right? You're making the assumption that I understand their perspective without doing the questions. And there's a lot of power in just asking a few questions. Like I had a good, and you actually brought this up earlier when we were talking about as security people now, then we walk in with like a hammer in hand and we're judge and jury there coming, hey, you need to do it this way or else this isn't going to happen. Like we're the only saying we know what's happening on. And I've had experiences even as a security person where someone else in my organization is coming, was like, hey, why are you doing this like this? We need to do it like this. I'm like, whoa, let's put the brakes on. Let's have a conversation real quick. Ask me a few questions and I'll tell you why. And then we'll dig into it. I guarantee by the time we get out of it, you're going to be a whole lot less upset, right? Because I do have reasons why I do things, and developers do too. Now and then mistakes are made, saying that's not happened. But even if a mistake was made, it's no longer a how do we, like it's not accusatory. Like we shouldn't be trying to punish someone for making a mistake or missing something. It's an opportunity for education, right? It's the chance to come in and be like, hey, look, I think you might have missed this. Tell me why you did it. Oh, that's why. That makes a whole lot of sense. But maybe let's do it this way, and let me tell you why, right? Yeah. And it's that opportunity, reframing the way that we approach it so that we're no longer, I don't want people to dread it if I walk down the hall or more in the modern times, send a Zoom invite to jump on a call and talk about something. Like you should be like, oh, it's Mike. I wonder what he wants to talk about instead of, oh, no, it's Mike again. He's got something he's going to complain about, right? Some of the social skills that go around that.
So it's catching people doing things right. I learned a lot of leadership back in the 90s. One of the top books was The 1 Minute Manager. So I've actually taken this and written about it on my LinkedIn, 1 Minute Security Manager. What I like about it, it's just taking it in quick, easy chunks. 1 minute opportunities, not just complaints, not, you're doing this wrong. And then you have to tie it into, and it's kind of like a sandwich. You say what you like, where opportunity could be, in terms of we can do it potentially better, and then also what you like, but keeping it all short and simple. So often, Mike, we like to complicate things, and particularly technology and cybersecurity. So keep information security simple, yes. Keep it short as well. So this way, whoever you're working with, whether it's your developer, champion, or an end user, they can understand the flow. All these little tips can help as you're building a security champion and as you're building leadership within the organization.
So, and that simple and short is it's an art form, to be honest. It's something that you don't people think they might come out the box with it, but you don't. And one of the exercises I'd love to see, and it's just I have a small background also in some intelligence stuff. That's where I learned to keep things short when I write things, right? And simple and core information is when you write things like intelligence reports or things similar to that thing. You have to practice the art of keeping it simple, short, and to the core of what you want to say, because otherwise somebody's going to be giving you a lot of red lines back in whatever you're writing, be like, okay, you need to do this again, right? But it's like, keep it clear. Take out all the fluff, right? Just 90% of the time, people are going to appreciate when you're upfront, when you're clear. Obviously, be conscious of being not too abrasive, but clear and direct, right?
Keep it positive, exactly. But let's, hey, how can we do this better? How do we make it more efficient? And I'm coming back to economics as a part of a lot of what we do. And I encourage people to study economics. So this way you can understand risk balances as well, when to employ a security control and maybe You may need a compensating control. Quick story on that, Mike, where back in the day, again, this was the International Hotel Company, they had a Windows 7 system. So this was like 6-7 years ago. Even so, Windows 7 they were using for a critical application. They couldn't patch it. The application developers said, you know what, if you install Service Pack, we think our application is going to go belly up. Can we get a waiver? So it comes back to asking the right questions. What is it being used for? Who is using it? Where is it being used? So it's like the Kipling, Rudyard Kipling, 6 honest serving men, who, what, why, when, where, how. We asked all of those, and actually turned out they were actually rewriting it. They just needed to limp along for like another 4 to 6 months before they could virtualize it. So I said, yeah, don't patch. We segregated it on the network. We told the people, don't use email, web browsing on this system. You have a desktop for that. Was there any critical data on this system? No, it was like room utilization rate. No PII, nothing super sensitive about it. So we made the decision, you don't need to patch, but how many controls do you have that'll say thou shalt have to patch? So it's just having that back and forth and being willing to negotiate type of a conversation, whether it's with the business, with developers, and with security. It's just having crucial conversations, being open as to what is going to be the best way, most efficient way to solve the problem.
And it's that flexibility, right? I think we all get some sort of formal education, whether you even go to college or not, right? You learn security from somewhere, whether it's from a book, online, college, mentor, something. It's willing to apply some of that, the practical knowledge you have, your street knowledge when you're doing this, right? Like, okay, I know the book says this, but using, like you said, using those questions, using that flexibility, going to the core things like, okay, well, why? Now, Betty, if they said, oh, we plan on using this for another 5 years, your answer might have been a little different, right? Like, that's when things start changing. But you're able to be flexible enough to, instead of like, oh, no, we can't do this, we have to patch, and we shut down the whole conversation, would have been a way worse experience, I'm assuming, for everybody involved versus having that flexibility and ability to have conversation. And this I'm going to tie us back into the mentor conversation a little bit here too. That is a powerful thing, I think, that not only for our mentors, but our mentors to relay onto the next generation that's coming up, right? If you're in a position, you are mentoring, it's not about just teaching the right answer, but it's teaching about when to be flexible, when to recognize that it's okay to leave the bulleted list that says I have to do it exactly this way, and be flexible enough to hear the other side of the story and be a little more creative with our approaches.
So if you've read the Checklist Manifesto, and we talked earlier about Adam Shostak and threat modeling, that's where I actually first heard about it. Checklists are very helpful just to make sure we're not missing anything, but you're exactly right. That flexibility, one, to follow the checklist, and maybe when we need to pivot a little bit, be creative with our problem solving. That's having that openness. Again, as you're mentoring, letting people know, hey, we do provide guidelines for you to follow. Do expect you to follow them, and then if you can't, be able to describe why you can't, and be able to quantify that. Not just because it's hard, but because what is going to be the best for that different situation. And it really will vary, and it comes back to emotional intelligence. And that's really where I try to build that next generation, is being able to develop emotional intelligence. So often we get really focused on what we're doing, particularly if there's an incident. When we think the worst is happening, oh my gosh, a hacker is inside, panic. One of my favorite opening lines from a book, don't panic. The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, right? That's my number one rule for incident response. Take a breath. Our brain likes oxygen for some reason. Think about and then look at it from different perspectives, and then ask, what questions can I ask? Not what do I need to tell someone else to do? They may, asking, particularly as you're coaching someone else, hey, how would you address this? What do you think? Is very powerful, because then they are solving the problem for themselves. See, if we just say, Mike, this is the only way to do a podcast, you're going to be like, yeah, whatever. If I say, hey, what are your ideas? That's actually a great social engineering technique as well, just getting people to talk and to think, and then we just partner. And together we solve the problems. And we create great podcasts, right?
That's right. You talk through that too, that pause tactic. I actually use 2 military jargon around the office all the time for people that work with me and for me. And I do a lot of recording on studio, right? I create a lot of video content around security. Hosting with people, it's a whole nother thing, right? There's the security part of it, but then there's also the producer part, right? Getting the person to be comfortable, be able to talk, be able to get through the conversation articulately. And I have 2 phrases I always use. The first one, we call the tactical pause, right? One that we throw around in the military a lot is where you just stop, breathe, collect, then act, right? It's just that microsecond of taking a pause before you do an action that allows you to be ready for it, right? And it's actually pretty natural. You never even see it on camera because it's so short, but when you mentally do that, prepares you a lot. My second one I like, LTPR. It's an acronym I picked up in my military days, and it stands for listen, think, pause, respond, right? And that's how I do most of my conversations with everybody. I try to apply that to, right? You listen to what's being said, you think about it for a second, and even after you're done thinking about it, take a breath, pause, and then you respond with your action response, right? Because going through those phases, taking that moment to really internalize what that other person's saying to you is one of those soft skills. It's a social engineering skill too, right? It buys you a little bit of time and it allows you to respond. Now, don't worry, it doesn't make you sound like you're going too slow in response. If anything, it makes you look stoic, which is powerful in itself.
Right. It's better to be quiet and a pure fool than open your mouth and remove all doubt. Yeah, is that old saying. But let me see if I got this right. LTPR. Listen, think, pause, respond. That is very powerful. It gives the unconscious brain time to think, and develop. Another technique I'll use is repeating the question. Really, it's so I understand the question, but it's also giving me a chance to think and pause and respond. So these little, sometimes subtle techniques can go a long way. And you're right. In public speaking, using quiet is very nerve-wracking. I'm also a part of Toastmasters, and I've learned how to get rid of audible pauses, ums, ahs, you knows, over time by using those techniques you just provided, Mike, are just fabulous. Thank you for sharing those.
Yeah, and especially for the ums and ahs, and those get me too. Usually only when it's the one time those really get in there is like someone asks me a question, I'm like, ooh, I don't know the answer. And then I start answering it, I'm like, those start popping out. But 99% of the rest of the time I do the same thing. And it's amazing. You'll see the most powerful speakers. There's a lot of public speakers using silence is a very powerful way to communicate, right? It builds suspense, but also allows you to prepare for what you're next to. So silence is a very, very powerful thing. I think in all social and interactions itself, something that anyone that's a social engineer can learn a step or two from. It's funny that the LTPR, I'll kind of show a little hand of where that got from. That was being taught in situations to survive interrogation. But it works in many other places also.
Interviews, job interviews, exactly. Think about how do you want to respond. Showing you're thoughtful in the response is part of it, because it can be very nerve-wracking. So yes, I've been in too many interviews that are really interrogations, not conversations. But if you find someone who's new into the field and building, use the LTPR, whether it's about having that crucial or difficult conversation or in an interview or just doing something like this. It works in multiple ways.
And this is where I have to go on a slight tangent. For all you security people out there, you're hiring security individuals, quit interrogating your individuals. That's not how you learn and find out what this person's capable of. Because I'm going to tell you right now, when they're sitting at their desk while they're doing their job, if that's how you're interacting with them on a daily basis, you're doing something wrong, right? Build out an ability to have a conversation with this person to really see who they are. Just have them have that conversation. Give feedback first. And one of the ways I always do this when I interview, I don't have the candidate start. I start. I'm like, look, I'm going to tell you about myself. I'm going to tell you about the work environment. I'm going to tell you about the position. and then I'm just going to open the floor and let you talk about yourself. But the thing is, I'm not putting you in the hot seat right off the bat. I'm going to break the ice. I'm going to let you relax because I want to know about you. I don't want to know the nervous you that's about to get interrogated that you're hoping to get this job for, right? Like it's not a great approach to really find valuable candidates, because a lot of times we'll judge, well, that guy had a horrible response in this one moment when I put him under pressure. That's great. You might have just lost an amazing potential candidate because you put them in a situation you're never going to actually put them in their job environment.
I've been in some where they're trivia contests as much as anything else. They're trying to see, can I trip up this person by asking questions? And it's not just one or two just to see how do they respond, but you can tell they're trying to show their knowledge. Too many people, Mike, I don't think are really taught how to have a good interview. They interview the way they've been interviewed. So I love your approach. Just keep it conversational, and you'll often get a lot of the questions that you have on your checklist answered through that means. In social engineering, we try to ask questions without asking questions. Try to be indirect rather than say, tell me about yourself. Say, maybe you can describe an experience, or what did you do this weekend? And by just talking through that, you can find out about who that person is and how they got to where they are, how they solve problems, because that's really what organizations want, are problem solvers. And that's what we're all trying to do in this area, whether it's realm of security or creating awesome applications, trying to make that business case to solve that mission area. We're all in this together, as they say.
And it's true. And it's funny, I think like the last episode recorded, I don't even think it's up yet, but it will be by the time this one airs. I talked to somebody about that. And the fact is, the community of cyber is amazing. And I love it because unlike most communities, we're still competitive even with our competitors, don't get me wrong. But we are in a different way than most other departments are, right? Your development community doesn't have, I think, or a lot of the other ones, business units, I think, don't have the camaraderie that cyber almost brings out with us, because we have this, it's us versus them, and by us versus them, it's all of us cyber people against the people trying to attack our applications. So it's really powerful. It's something that's just inspiring, right? It's great to be part of such a great community that is working together for the greater good, to be honest, for all of our organizations.
So I've used this as I've been teaching, and how a lot of people get nervous. Well, how do I get involved? Just reach out and say hi. It's really that simple. No one's going to take away your birthday, but just if you're curious about someone, just begin asking the questions. Hey, can I learn how you do that? Can we find some time, making sure don't have another agenda. Sometimes they're veiled sales techniques I've learned through social media. No, but if you're just honestly trying to build yourself, build others, just reach out and just be part of the community, like veteran of cybersecurity, one I'm very passionate about, VetSec. If you are a military veteran, check out veteransec.org. We are completely nonprofit. Our passion is about building others in the military community. So we love being able to watch others learn and grow, as you put it, Mike, where other people's success become our success. So there's lots of ways you can just be part of the community, and that really builds your own career.
Absolutely. Great program also. I know quite a few people that have been able to leverage it and do a lot for them. So if you guys are veterans listening to this, absolutely reach out and look to that program. Now, as we're coming close to the end of this episode, I have a question I've been actually asking a lot of my guests. I'm kind of trying to get a consensus answer. And it's kind of a loaded question, but I want to see what your response is. And the idea is, we have development teams, we have security teams, and I think we even used the word of siloed earlier, right? A lot of the times it's security people saying, well, devs aren't doing this, and developers saying, well, security's not doing this for us. What is some techniques that we can use in the workplace to help bridge that divide?
So as I mentioned earlier, using something like the 1-minute manager. And this is also from Toastmasters. With every speech you give in Toastmasters, you get feedback. The way we give feedback is you have to say 2 good things to every one thing. So do that in any interaction. You can't just say, oh, you didn't do something. You have to find something to be thankful for, something you like, something that is going well, and then you can say something where you have room for improvement. And then being open as to how it can be improved. There's, as I mentioned earlier, more than one way to solve the problem, but just trying to keep it positive as much as possible. Again, it's a social engineering technique, building up others' ego, and then they're willing to be part of it. And then maybe even coming to them and saying, you know what, I know this isn't right, and I don't quite know how to solve it. What are your thoughts? How can we make this better? 'Cause everything has room for improvement. So, just being open to that conversation, you're amazing what can be built together.
That was a great answer, a bunch of great advice. Ron, I want to thank you so much for jumping on, having this conversation with me today. I think our listeners are going to get a whole lot of great advice and practical stuff they're going to be able to walk away. So I just want to say thank you for your time.
My pleasure, and thank you for letting me be here. Great show.
Now, for all my listeners out there, make sure you guys log in and hear our next episode of the Security Champions podcast, where I'm going to continue to meet with security people in the industry, and we're going to talk about security champion programs and pretty much anything security that we find interesting. And on a final note, always remember, security is a journey, not a destination.